Kieran asked us to join you this morning to talk briefly about the future of media planning, about some of the challenges that we face and about the role that AI is playing in that journey. And our aim today is to start off by delivering some good news, but also with a bit of a warning. The good news is that Dr. Dolly said AI might make half of us redundant. I prefer to think about it slightly differently. I think the good news is that AI is giving us all a promotion, so congratulations. What it's allowing us to do is it's essentially a bit like a new hire that is able to hit the ground running straight away. Someone who comes into the organization and can instantly take on quite a lot of those sort of heavy lifting, routine and repeatable tasks and do them to a really, really high standard. But the warning that comes with that is that if we outsource rather than just the labor, if we outsource the critical thinking as part of that, we are in danger, I think, of compounding a couple of challenges and a couple of trends that we're already facing. And they are, and the guys earlier on alluded to this as well, a rising sense of marketing irrelevance and some declining Irish media as well. So over the course of the next 10 minutes or so, we want to talk you through a journey, how we see things evolving and where we see opportunities and indeed the opportunity to avoid a number of threats. And to tell that story, I'm going to enlist the help of my two wonderful daughters. This is Belle and Charlie. Don't worry, this isn't a LinkedIn post about what my two daughters taught me about B2B marketing. But Belle is 9. Charlie is the younger sister. Charlie's 7. Belle absolutely adores playing hockey. Charlie also goes to hockey sometimes, not all that often. She's not a big fan. Belle loves swimming, Taylor Swift, and for some reason, stories about Greek myths. Charlie could not give a monkey's about any of these things. And in fact, she's often actively extremely hostile towards all of them. But because Charlie's the younger sister, she is exposed to all of these things quite a lot of the time. And I think it raises two important points. The first is that I clearly need to address my parenting style. And the second, probably more relevant to the room, is that sometimes when you live right next to a big sibling or to a big sister, people assume that what works for them works for you as well. What they like, you will like. All of us, collectively, in this room, are a little bit the long-suffering Charlie. Because we live in the shadow of a big sibling next door. We live next door to the UK, which is a much bigger market. And oftentimes, we do get terms dictated to us a little bit, or we get trends dictated to us a little bit. We get global organizations telling us that what works in one market is going to work in the other. And that's not strictly true, because there are differences. For example, UK GDP is about 6 times larger than Irish GDP. The UK population is about 13 times bigger than the population in the Republic of Ireland. So why in God's name is UK ad spend 31 times larger than it is in Ireland? We've charted up, and this is the only chart you're going to see, I think, today from us. We've charted up the relationship between ad spend and average income over about 30 different markets. And there is an incredibly tight correlation between average household income or average income and average ad spend across the overwhelming majority of markets, with 2 exceptions. The US and the UK, where there are very, very big differences. Brands in those markets spend much, much more on advertising than they do in markets like Ireland, or the markets we're similar to, which are places like Belgium and Austria and New Zealand. Why? It's not because consumers in those markets are much wealthier, although there are variances. It's not because the advertising landscape in those markets is massively different, although again, there are nuances and there are differences. And it's not because brands in those markets are delivering much better returns. They're not. A recent paper from Les Binet called Go Big or Go Home said that actually ad-driven profit in the UK is down 11% since COVID. Our view is that actually these markets have become ever so slightly dysfunctional from an advertising perspective. And that's not to cast aspersions. It speaks to the points that were made earlier on today. The fact that 78% of UK advertising is going into pure play digital, that isn't necessarily being driven with the best interest of delivering results. That's being driven by a large group of organizations in the background, which is Silicon Valley, essentially pushing money into those spaces. And let's remember, they're not benevolent. They have a vested interest. Google's motto used to be, do no evil. That's not their motto anymore. So there is a push towards these platforms, and it's distorting advertising, especially in those kind of two bellwether markets. We sit in between those two. And one of the things you'll notice from this chart is that actually in Ireland, we underinvest in media. We are below the line. There is headroom for growth. Yes, we are a small market, but we are still underinvesting in media. I believe we've got a very, very good balance to our media mix right now. We sort of largely adhere to those 60-40 rules, and the shape of our ad investment doesn't look quite the same as it does in other markets, where they've become distorted by hype, a little bit of tech obsession, and that kind of drive towards short-termism. And I think the point we want to make with this is that if we follow the same path, we'll probably expect to see a lot of the same results. Results like Mike Follett talked about earlier on, where we are sort of hollowing out some elements of advertising effectiveness. Irish media is much more to all of us in the room than a distribution channel. It's a mirror, and it reflects back how we see ourselves. It reflects back Irish humour, Irish contradictions, Irish points of view, Irish voices. And it's a requirement to kind of preserve our sense of self, but also to keep our institutions and our discourse healthy, which is more important than ever right now. And I think as a small market, we're potentially more vulnerable than most, especially when we live next door to big siblings who can sometimes dictate trends to us. And the trend is there. The warning signs are there. And these are the warnings that we need to heed, because over the last decade, we have seen this drift towards short-termism in terms of advertising investment. We see it reflected in some of the figures, we see it reflected in some of the results, and we probably see it reflected in the conversations that we have day in and day out. And the risk that's in front of us right now is that AI unchecked, with not necessarily the most benevolent people behind it, there is the risk that it supercharges this drift. And we have to be careful, because we have a sort of an instinctive an instinctive attraction in marketing towards the shiny new thing. And it's great sometimes, but we also need to keep it in check at times and resist the urge towards sort of magpie marketing. Because the same instincts, I guess, that draw us towards powerful, big ideas sometimes lead us to confuse powerful, big ideas with powerful, big tech. And that's something we need to watch out for.
And now we're at the crossroads, where a new wave of technology with even more information and given to us even faster. So we need to look at ourselves and see if we want to repeat history and outsource the work, or are we going to embrace AI as a new partner in our team? So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you all to our new colleague, AI. They are smart, fast, tireless, and they're getting better every day. They can code, summarize, translate, analyze. They're brilliant at tasks, and they deliver impressive work at first glance. But like any colleague or any new colleague, they need a bit of guidance. They don't know the nuances, the culture, the why behind the work. They don't have instinct, taste, empathy. And when I think about the role of AI in media, I think about the maths and the magic. AI will give us the maths. but it's up to us in the room to create the magic. And you think about all those everyday tasks that has made media planning at times a bit more painful than delightful. AI will take away those pain points and free up our time to focus on the magic, to be better experts, to be more strategic, because we're going to work smarter, not harder. And AI is making things faster. We can write better briefs. We can design, edit, optimize presentations in minutes. We can take complex data and simplify it into charts. We're executing more efficiently. We can interrogate vast amounts of data in minutes. And I suppose to give you a sense of how we're using AI on Core to improve the quality of work, I want to show you 2 examples to give you an idea. The first is Search AI. This is a tool that essentially lets us make sure our clients are spending money when they have to, but actually, more importantly, not spending when they don't have to. And to give you a sense of how it works, if you look at the example here, which is Mercedes GLC, which I'm going to have to see with someone that's seen Lawrence's example a couple of minutes ago, Search AI will then scan the Google search page, and it's looking for a few things. Firstly, is a competitor ad present? In this case, it is. But more importantly, is Mercedes number 1 organically? In this case, it isn't. Therefore, Search AI will activate our paid search campaign to ensure our brand is getting that traffic and not our competitors. And the same happens in reverse. If someone searches the exact same example, but in this case, there's no competitor and we are number 1 organically, it will disable our brand campaign and we get to save that budget. This tool essentially lets us be more efficient in our media, but in minutes. The second is Precision AI, and this allows us to create multiple ad versions of a brand ad, even using the most basic of assets, to showcase different features of the products, to personalize the ads to make them more relevant, to test different CTAs, to try out different price points, all without those huge volume cost of versioning. These are probably 2 bigger examples of how we're using AI, but in reality, there's lots and lots of little things we're already using AI for in every day, from summarizing reports, pulling audience insights, polishing awards, which are actually the entries and not the physical things, to improving workflows, to checking tenders, to maybe helping someone improve their script for a presentation today, which, on a side note, AI is harsh with feedback. AI is actually doing so much for us already. It's letting us spot big trends and data sets. It's automating and repeatable and frequent tasks, and it's validating our hunches and hypotheses. And it will continue to do much more. But the one thing it can't do is it can't give us the answer, and nor should it. That answer, that decision, that final call needs to come from us, the experts, the people, and that's something we can't outsource.
So just to finish it out, a couple of points. There is a recent CMO study conducted by eMarketer in the US, and it asked CMOs back in spring, I think, of this year, how were they evaluating the role that AI is playing in the marketing mix? And it was some very, very interesting results. 54% of CMOs said that the main way they were evaluating AI was in its ability to deliver operational efficiencies. Very good. 54% also said it was about how it could save time with the team, using so many of the different examples that Sarah talked about, all of the multiple little things that it's helping us with in our day-to-day. 39% said the third way of evaluating it was, is it delivering performance campaign efficiencies and gains? And 31% said reducing cost. So far, so good. This all makes perfect sense. This is all really, really useful stuff. These are all the really kind of tangible, helpful benefits that we get from AI. The worrying thing, though, is that those CMOs were also asked a second question. This is how they're evaluating AI. But what is their expectation that AI is going to contribute? That's the evaluation. What's the expectation? And do you know what the number one thing they said was? 44% of them said it was going to drive marketing effectiveness. Now, those of you familiar with a lot of the papers that have been referenced today will understand that any example of a study that basically mixes up efficiency which are all of the metrics we see on one side, and marketing effectiveness on the other side, is a worry. Because this is, taken very literally, what this is saying is that CMOs are saying the most significant thing that advertising and marketing can do for a business is simply cost less, which is very worrying because we know efficiency is not the same as effectiveness. Reducing costs does not make ads and brands better. There is a missing piece of the puzzle in between those two things. Now, we got the graveyard shift, so I could show you an example of a picture with a missing piece of the puzzle, but I think there's a far better analogy to explain when you've got a plan with a big hole in it, and it comes from the Underpants Gnomes in South Park. The Underpants Gnomes had a plan. It was a 3-stage plan. The first stage was to collect the underpants. The second stage, they hadn't quite worked out the second stage yet, but there was a second stage. But the third stage then was profit. I don't know how to translate underpants into profit, neither do they. And it is a ridiculous example, but there are shades of what we've just seen in some of that data. On the one hand, as an industry, elements of us believe that if we can just drive operational efficiencies, everything will be better. But there's a missing stage in the middle. We've got operational efficiencies as stage one. Something happens, and then advertising effectiveness rises. That's not strictly true. There is a missing piece of the puzzle, and it is the critical thinking and the creativity and the imagination that we've talked about. So we'll leave you with this. The learning and the implication for us in our experience with using AI over the last number of years, and I'm surprised to see how much consensus there is in the room today as well around this, is that we, as agencies, certainly, we mustn't outsource the critical thinking. We need to take advantage of the promotion that AI gives us because it frees us up to do more of that, to use more of our imagination, our creativity as an industry. And yes, absolutely, let's let AI take more of the heavy lifting in terms of the maths. Let's let it do all of those things that Sarah's talked about in terms of helping us in our day-to-day tasks and in the labor. But let's not outsource the magic that's critical to what we do, especially in a market like this, in a market like ours, where our domestic and indigenous media is so important to us. Because if we get that right, if we let it give us the promotion and free us up to do those things, then we get to preserve, I think, the things that are unique about Irish media. And then Belle and Charlie get to grow up in an Ireland that still values its own voices, its own news, its own stories, its own humour, its own creativity. And I think more than any algorithm, that's definitely worth investing in. So thank you.